be able to focus. So I'm just going to start off with just a few things about the Leadership Forum community. Thank you so much for joining us. Every week has been filled with learning, collaboration, and these are some of the things that we believe in as a community. The three tenets here are personal leadership, and a learning network, and meaningful change. Last week, our speaker was Lyndon Rigo, and he talked a lot about change, and also he talked a little bit about how change can decrease our productivity at times, but at the end of it, we all come out better and something great is created. And that's where we're at here with the Leadership Forum community, is that we're all creating something great together. And so with that said, as Leo had also encouraged you, we encourage you to participate in many different ways today. Also in our chat, number one would be the first way to participate. Also, we'll be opening it up for comments during breakout sessions and other ways. But if you feel like you don't get a chance to completely express yourselves in those areas, we also have a Slack channel, and the discussion continues there. And we also have a coffee hour, and the discussion will continue there also tomorrow. So I'll hand it over to Kathy Bittner, and she will go ahead and introduce our speaker.
Great, thanks so much, LaTanya. Great job. Welcome, everyone. Really happy to have everybody here, and probably more and more people will join us in the next few minutes. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Tricia Naddaff. We've been friends and colleagues for, I was trying to think, Tricia, but I think we might go back like 30 years or so.
A long time, Kathy. A long time.
We met each other, right after we were born. And but she's the president of a management research group known as MRG up in Portland, Maine. Tricia is an international leader, and she works to create transformational developmental assessments, and she conducts extensive research in the areas of leadership and sales leadership, career development, personal growth. She's been working with individuals and teams and organizations for over 30 years in consulting and coaching and product design and research. She also shares MRG research and learnings around the world. You may have seen her at events like American Training and Development, the Society for Consulting Psychology, where I see her, and we have fun together, have a couple of drinks, and dance on the dance floor. So we have a lot of fun together, and she's a TEDx speaker. She's a contributor to the Association of Coaching magazine. She's a speaker at conferences in the US and around the globe. So MRG is a great worldwide network of consultants and clients, and Tricia provides a lot of thought leadership around the space of leadership, and she also is very interested in gender differences, and she's written articles like How Women Are Transforming the Practice of Leadership. She's written articles around global coaching perspectives, the Association of Coaching for Coaching magazine in the UK. So I could go on and on, but that's probably enough and all you need to know, and you're gonna just be in for a treat when I turn it over to Tricia, as I will right now. So Tricia, take it away.
Kathy, that was very sweet. And just so you know, I told Kathy, keep it short. So that wasn't very short. Pat and I had done some of those things. So this is my first Leadership Forum experience, and I have to tell you, Gil Hoffer and Kathy have shared their joy of Leadership Forum for a long time with me. And I was actually hoping to join you all in upstate New York this summer. So I'm sad I won't be able to be with you in person, but really excited to be with you today. So Kathy, thank you for the invitation. So as Kathy said, we're an assessment house, and we've been around for 37 years, and we gather a lot of data. And what we do with that data as a database is we do a tremendous amount of research with it. And this idea of looking at leadership in crisis, looking at leadership in difficult times, because we've been around for so long, we have looked at this through a number of recessions. We have looked at it after 9/11. We looked at it after what is oddly called the Great Recession in 2009. And so here we are again, right? So we have updated this research, and I'm excited to share it with you and give you a chance to talk about it. So we're going to sort of dip into 3 different areas. We're going to talk about what's happening internally to leaders right now, that what happens to the brain in crisis, and how we can help sort of overall well-being, ours and any leaders that we're supporting. We're going to talk about our research, about what we know about how leaders behave who do a good job in this kind of circumstances. And then we're going to talk about shared leadership and our belief that it's time to bury the myth of the heroic leader and move into models of shared leadership. So that's our time together. I'm going to talk fast because I want to make sure you have time to be together. And Matt, can I just check in? Do we have poll access? And don't worry if we don't, we can handle it through the chat, but just checking in.
Not yet, we do not.
No worries, we'll use chat if we don't have it.
Sounds
okay.
Good.
Let's jump in. So I don't know how many of you are students of neuroscience or brain science. If you are not, if you're interested in leadership, I would just highly recommend you dive into the neuroscience space. And if you're looking for a good primer, David Rock's Your Brain at Work is a great place to start. But let's talk about a little bit about what's happening in the brain right now. Looking at the brain at a macro level, there are 2 areas of the brain that we're concerned about. The older brain, which is basically the limbic system, is the area we're most concerned about, which is the part of the brain that does fight, flight, or freeze. It's the part of the brain that is automaticity for us. It's where our habits are. It is a very threat sensitive part of the brain, right? And it comes on quick, it reacts quickly, and it takes over very quickly. The prefrontal cortex is the most current part of our brain, and it's the part of the brain that does all our higher order thinking, right? Our problem solving, our decision making. It's also where our willpower lives. It's where metacognition lives, our ability to sort of look at ourselves and our own thinking. So it's the higher order thinking. But it's also the gas guzzler of the brain. So our brain really prefers to default to the older brain whenever it can, and only use the prefrontal cortex in sort of very specific circumstances. What happens when the brain is under stress is it really automatically goes to the older brain, and it automatically shuts off the prefrontal cortex. So as a result, what we end up with is this threat-sensitive brain that doesn't really have a lot of access to our higher order thinking, that goes right back to habitual patterns. Whatever we can do automatically is what it wants to do. And as a result, the brain ends up on its own, facilitating feelings of fear and anxiety. We tend to be distracted. We tend to be less focused. We can't think as clearly. Our emotions tend to run higher. We tend to be more tired. Those are all the things that sort of just automatically go into play. And there's a whole bunch of biology associated with this. Our immune system gets depleted. The stress mechanisms of the brain turn into bodily functions where our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up. So in general, it's an okay experience for an immediate reaction to threat. It is not a good place for us to be when we're in a sustained state of threat and stress and overwhelm as we are now. So we're going to start with the leadership mindset that we can't serve from an empty vessel. This is a Zen saying. It's like the 5,000-year-old equivalent of put your oxygen mask on yourself before you try to help anybody else with an oxygen mask. But I like the Zen saying right now because I think we're all tired about hearing about masks. So the first place we have to start if we want to be effective leaders and we want to help other people be effective leaders is we have to start with the interior. We have to start with our own well-being. So our poll question is this. Matt, are we still off poll?
Yep, still
That's
off
quite
poll.
all right. Don't worry. So you're gonna put your answer in the chat. function, if you will. All you need to do is put the number in. So let's check in and let's be honest. How are you doing maintaining your own well-being? You know, are you one of these people who really achieved mastery at it and you've got your rhythm down? Is it number 2? Pretty good. You're really starting to get the hang of this. We've been in this now 11 weeks. Maybe it's starting to work for you. I'm a number 3. Some days I'm okay, and other days, it's more do what I say, not do what I do. Or have you really been operating on fumes and right now you're not doing much to take care of yourself? So keep an eye on that chat. Let's look. We've got lots of 3s. I'm in good company. We have some 2s. We have some blessed ones who pay attention to the words. Perhaps they can be our well-being coaches. Right? Lots of 3s. We've got some people ranging. I'm bouncing between 2 and 3. This is great. This is great. All right. So what is probably where most of us are in the 2 and 3 range. We've got a very small number in 4 and a few more who are in 1. So listen, we keep this in mind. We can't serve from the empty vessel. We have to be focusing on leading from the inside out. Our minds, our bodies, our spirits, our emotions, we need to serve that. And there are some great evidence-based ways of doing that, right? I won't go through this whole list, but these are some of these things you know well, right? Sleeping, eating well, exercising, spending time outdoors. And then there are some deeper practices, right? Meditation, breathing exercises, journaling. Maybe some of you know about the emotional freedom technique, more commonly called tapping. If you're interested in that and don't know about that, I'm happy to send you an introductory video. Music has a really good outcome in the brain. Your brain responds very well to shifting in mood based on the music you're listening to. Gratitude practices. I've been sharing with some friends and family good YouTube videos, family-friendly YouTube videos. Having a decent schedule, there's really good evidence of taking care of others does a lot to soothe our brain and connection, right? So there's a lot of good things that we know about practices that we can experiment to find the ones that work for us. There are also some really strong evidence-based studies that tell us what doesn't help us. So too much attention to the news, if you become a news junkie, backing away from that. It's very personal what gives you enough comfort so that you know that you are informed, but what sends you into a dark place. We know that the news networks cannot be called good news networks. They're by and large bad news networks. So you've got to be really careful with what you're consuming. Overindulgence in food, in alcohol, in sugar, like we know that wrecks our bodies and it also impacts our brain. Not maintaining boundaries. I would imagine this is a very giving group of people. And so you have to maintain how much am I taking care of myself and how much am I taking care of others. Trying to be perfect, and particularly in crisis that really messes with our brains. And focusing too much on things you can't control. Our brain is happier and less threat sensitive if it's focusing on things that we have some control over. So good chance to just do an audit for yourself of how much on this list are you actually engaging in and how much in that list are you engaging in, right? All right. So keep that in mind. We're going to break in a little bit for some conversation around what we should be doing in the leadership space right now, but I want to get you to the research, right? So that's the interior space of leadership well-being. What about the exterior space? What about the space of how should we be showing up as leaders, right? How should we be coaching leaders in ways that show up? So this study is, hang on, I think my animation's a little bit wonky. So in this study, we use our Leadership 360 assessment. It has 22 leadership behaviors and 31 competencies. And when we do research around effectiveness, what we do is we look at leaders who get really high scores in the competencies, these measures of effectiveness, and we look at, wow, how are they behaving that's different than the rest of the leadership population? What behaviors distinguish these people who are seen as being very effective in whatever competencies we want to look at? This particular study is a little over 5,000 leaders. Recent, right? Over the last couple of years, their approach to leadership. Gender mix is pretty typical in the leadership space. We looked at a variety of industries. It's a global study, and it's a variety of management levels and management functions. So it's a diverse group of leaders we're looking at. So it's very interesting when a certain set of behaviors seems to transcend some of the other demographic differences around leadership. It tends to be sort of something you can bank on as being important regardless of the situation that you're in. So we took a subset of our 31 competencies and created these 3 competency clusters. And just as a reminder, we do this every time there is a leadership crisis, and we modernize it because we change the competencies that we measure over time, because what we expect of leaders has changed over time. So, so this is an updated version of the last study we did, which was based on, again, that Great Recession. So these are the 3 clusters, and we always cross-reference our research with other bodies of research, and there's pretty good, which is, as you know, rare, pretty good agreement across different bodies of research that these 3 areas are basically the triangle that makes up effectiveness in difficult situations. So the first is being connected with people, really being able to sustain and build those connections with people. And as we saw earlier, connection is one of the reasons this really works in this current setting, is that when people feel connected to others, their brain function calms down, their threat sensitivity, which allows them to bring on that higher functioning more easily. The second cluster is credibility and instilling confidence. So leaders who others feel confident in do better in this situation. So if you are seen as credible, and if people feel like I can relax because I'm in good hands, then again, what that does is it calms down the threat sensitivity in the brain and brings back online that higher order thinking. And finally, we need the leaders to be able to bring on their own higher order thinking. We need them to be effective thinkers, and particularly effective thinkers under threat, and effective thinkers when things are uncertain and ambiguous. There's no roadmap. So we need people who can think effectively in that kind of circumstance. So let me ask you, want you to be thinking of, because we're going to come up with another poll question of, okay, what do we think is hardest for leaders right now? So what are the competencies under being connected with people? They won't be surprising to you, right? The ability to get people engaged, the ability to involve people, to bring up kind of that positive emotion of enthusiasm, the ability to really listen when people are in this uncertain state, the ability to be a very clear, open, straightforward communicator, and the ability to really be able to read people, to understand both by listening what is said and also what is not said. The ability to be credible and instills confidence is the biggest cluster. This is the hardest one, just in general. It may not be the hardest now, but it's the hardest in general because it takes in so much. So credibility, of course, we're measuring credibility with people above the leader in the organization. We're measuring credibility with peers and direct reports, so that's stakeholder credibility. We're measuring here how effective is the leader seen overall, just generally, is their reputation a strong reputation? Their ability to make effective decisions. So I feel confident in a leader who I know has good decision-making skills. Their ability to handle conflict. I can relax when I know the leader can handle conflict well. I'm more confident in somebody who is, I believe, self-confident. So how self-confident does a leader look? And finally, in this current state of uncertainty, how resilient are they? Can they bounce back in really uncertain times? So things are going to get hard, and can they rebound in that more challenging space? Again, so I can be calmer because this person has credibility with me. They're exhibiting things that make me feel like I can relax and be confident in them as a leader. And then the final one is that intellectually sharp. Again, remember, it's hard to be intellectually sharp in uncertain times. the threat sensitivity of the brain shuts this stuff down. And so a leader needs to be able to do things. Again, we looked at those things for well-being. A leader needs to be able to do things to bring that higher order thinking back online, right? So I want to know that my leader can effectively think now, that they can learn quickly. There's no roadmap, right? So they need to be able to take in new information and adapt and learn quickly. I need to know that this leader is effectively self-aware, that they have that metacognition ability, the ability to watch themselves and make appropriate adjustments. And I need to know that they can think when things are up in the air and it's complex and it's uncertain and things are ambiguous. I need to know that this person doesn't freak out in that space, right? So if we have that connected to people, credibility, and that ability to think, if they can demonstrate those three things, then it's easier for the workforce to be able to decrease their threat sensitivity and really bring more of themselves into the work, right? So our next poll question, which will work the same way. Matt, are we still working the same way using the chat? I'm looking at your face so you can nod if you want.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go out on a limb here as we are trying out new things, if people want to bear with me. And at the top of your screen, you should see, for those on a computer, you should see you are viewing Tricia Naddaff's screen, and then there's a view options function. If people see that, kind of just nod your head. I can see most of your screens. Yep. So if you see, click that, and then it brings a drop down, and then click annotate. And if you see, there is an option for stamps.
This is fun.
Yep, trying something new, learning on the fly here.
Yeah, good, I love it.
Yep, there's an option for stamps, and you should be able to, let's see, yep, oh, there we go. You can vote with your stamp, if I'm not mistaken. Sue, I see you're taking off mute. Is this working right?
Yep. So people can just vote next to put your vote by, yeah, right on the screen, which people are doing, which is great.
Nice job, Matt.
Thank you, Sue, for the suggestion.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This is great. And people are getting very creative with their stamps.
We see.
People are drawing, people All right, good. So it looks like, there's a pretty, and people are just randomly choosing things that aren't on the list. I love that too. It looks like, actually this looks like we were all got finger paints and were able to do something together. So, what is interesting is it looks like 1 and 2 are probably getting the most votes, with a little bit less in 3, which is not surprising, right? Because a lot of what we do in leadership development is teach people the thinking part of leadership. Connecting with people right now not only is hard because, one, there's some neuroscience that tells us it's hard to do all 3 of these things. Our brains are wired to have preferences, in particular preferences between 1 and 3. But connecting with people is hard right now, just full on hard, because we're all remote. So we're stressed, we're remote, we're working from home. Many people are not working from home by themselves. They've got other people to engage with. So these are things where our ability to make these work need to be more intentional. We often need shared leadership partners. I'm tipping my hand a little bit here, and we're going to talk about that at the end. But I want to get you to a breakout opportunity. So I want to just share with you. How do I clear the screen? You did it. Thank you. So I'm going to share with you, so what came out of the research, right? There are 3 things that came out of the research, 3 categories of spaces where leaders who are highly effective across all of these competencies distinguish themselves, right? So the first thing was in their thinking, not surprising, right? Because that's one of the cores. In their thinking, they are more strategic. So they were spending time thinking more strategically, making time apart from the tactical work to read a little bit more, to have more strategic conversations, and then to talk strategically with their teams. They were bringing expertise more into play, right? So if they're HR expertise, marketing expertise, manufacturing expertise, whatever their bodies of expertise were, they were going back to them and bringing them into play. Like, this is what I really know, I know well. And of course, not surprising, they were more innovative. Because when there's no roadmap, innovative as an approach to thinking and leadership becomes more critical. If we have a roadmap and a plan, innovative can be the seasoning in the roadmap. If we have no roadmap, then innovative takes on more of an important character in moving us forward. These leaders were also had very specific, let's call it voice. They had a very specific way of engaging with people, right? They were more persuasive. They knew when it was time to explain, be clear and constant, be very clear in their messaging, but they also knew when it was time to become more compelling and to draw people in, often with some more optimism. This is what's going to be helpful for us. And they also knew how to balance, when do I lift up people's spirits? When do I bring in that enthusiasm? And when is it important for me to understand what the emotional climate is and bring in the Zen, right? Bring in the calm, bring in the reassurance, right? So they were able to do both ends of that continuum. And finally, they were able to be really engaged, right? To be engaged with others and to bring others into engagement. So the first thing that we saw is they were able to be compassionate, both compassionate with themselves and compassionate with others. They were able to offer help, right? Offer to help, but also ask for help. So there was this really kind of a good give and take in the space. They invited people to input. They didn't do the hero, like they didn't say, I'm the single person who has all the answers. They really were able to invite people in to share ideas, but they also didn't hold back, right? They took the initiative to lead. They didn't wait until there was more information, wait until they got approval, wait until things were clearer, wait until everybody calmed down. They stepped into the leadership space. So again, it brings in that sense of confidence. Like, we are not in a leadership vacuum here. The person is taking on the responsibility. Okay, so we have looked at the interior space, like how do we, for ourselves, take care of ourselves so that we can then think about behavior. And we have seen some of the behavior patterns that make a difference in expression of leadership. And so now what I'd really like you to do is Matt's gonna break us up into groups of 3. And I want you to talk about what ways do you think the approaches of leadership really need to be different now, that we need to be paying attention to some important things. Think interior and exterior, right? Well-being and behavior. And in what ways are you starting to imagine that this whole thing that we're going through now may have a lasting impact on the ways we approach leadership? It might not just be a period of time. It might actually change some things about the way we think about leadership. So I'm going to ask you to go into your groups, and I'm going to ask you to share some of the insights in chat as you're talking, right? Because we're going to keep a running tally of what people are sharing in their conversations. So you can assign somebody, or you can just all do it individually, but share some insights in the chat as you're talking. You're going to have 15 minutes for this.
Sounds good. I just posted the questions in the chat for people so you can reference them when you're going into your groups, and I will be breaking you out into groups for 15 minutes and starting around now. And you'll see a countdown when it's time to come back.
Thanks, Matt. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you had good conversation. I told Matt I'm going to whip us through this next session. I've got something I'm really hoping to have some conversation time around. So As we, I want to just remind us all where we started. Can't serve from an empty vessel, and it alone. And I think I just want to put a slide up that says, get a link a webinar that looks at shared leadership that will give you a full explanation for this slide. But what we expect of leadership has changed so dramatically over the last 3 decades. This is the map of what we expect from leaders right now. And I can tell you that looking at the neuroscience, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's impossible for an individual to master all of that. And so even before now, the leadership demands that
Excuse me. Sorry to interrupt, Tricia. Share your screen one more time so people can see the slides.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
All right, then I'm going to slide back because this is the slide I wanted you to see. That's what we expect of leaders now, right? It's that. And it's insane. And all of this uses different parts of the brain, different neural networks, and it doesn't, it's very hard for our brains to get mastery, just competency in all of it. So we're in a state where what we're asking for leaders is above and beyond what one person can do. And so I think it behooves us as leaders and as people who support the development of leaders to break this myth apart, right? The myth of the heroic leader, it doesn't work anymore. Maybe it never did, but it certainly doesn't now. And so we would argue at MRG, it's really time to move to models and methods of shared leadership. And there are a whole host of ways to do shared leadership, from very formal to very informal. And here are just 6 examples that I want to just stimulate your brain, because then we're going to go into conversation around this. So co-leadership is more formal, right? We have 2 leaders working on leading a project or an initiative. The one I like best on this is thinking partnerships. So let's imagine I'm a good, clear communicator, but I'm not very skilled at persuasion. So I could grab a thinking partner who is really persuasive to help me in that space. Imagine that I'm really good tactically, but not as good strategically. So I can find a strategic thinking partner. So we have to stop thinking that it has to all live within me. I coach a lot of people about running their units like micro organizations. So if I'm good at strategy, but not good at implementation, who's my implementer? If I'm good at big picture thinking, but not good at the details, who's good at the details, right? Having peer mentors and peer coaching relationships are very helpful, where we come together, we have a 2-person relationship, and we ask each other questions and help each other's minds grow in that space. Peer advisories groups are where we would come together on a regular basis, and we would act more as advisors. So I come and say, I'm having this problem with one of my direct reports, and you as my peers say, you know what, I've had a similar problem. This might work for you. And then if we can have less hierarchical definitions of leadership, if we can see it not as the higher you are, somehow the more capable you are as leaders. And one way to do that is have leaders actually ask for feedback from people more junior than them in the organization. It starts to demystify this idea of the higher you are, the more competent that you are as leadership. So this time we're going to go back into our groups. We're going to have 7 minutes. And what I really want you to think about is, in what ways could you see that shared leadership might be even more important now? You can also, by the way, disagree with me. You can say it's not time for shared leadership. So I don't mean to presuppose you agree with the idea of shared leadership. And I'd like you to also to share, where do you expect to see resistance to shared leadership? Where is, maybe it's a good idea, Tricia, but not going to happen because of this, this, and this. So let's talk about shared leadership. 7 minutes. Dump us in. Matt, probably only 6
How you doing, Todd? Looks like you're on mute there, buddy. There you go.
Either that or I lost my voice.
No worries. I will put you into a breakout room. I put the questions in the chat function, so you should be able to see.
I just popped in because I was doing an interview, so I had the first.
No worries. Glad you joined us.
Better late than never.
Exactly. Better late than never. All right. Looking for a breakout room to put you in now.
All right.
Back. I'm sorry I didn't give you as much time as I wanted, but I get excited. So I'm just going to wrap up and turn it over to Howard. So it really, if we take away three things, I think together is, you can't serve from an empty vessel. So we need to be taking care of ourselves. We need to be encouraging others to take care of themselves. There are aspects of leadership that are more important now than in ordinary times, and so we should prioritize those when we're thinking of how we're approaching the role. And we can't do it alone. I think full stop, right? We're in a very complex state. Leadership in and of itself is complex. So we can't do it alone. So I'm going to turn it over to Howard, but I'm just going to let you know, we've put together a list of resources for you, webinars such that would expand some of this content that, we're very happy to share. And for those who can join for the lunchtime discussion tomorrow, I'm going to be there, so it'll be fun to extend the conversation. So hope to see you there. So over to you, Howard.
Thanks so much, Tricia. Tricia, that was a great session. Lively discussion, great content, great inspiration for follow-up thought. Just as an FYI, I'm very honored to serve as co-chair along with LaTanya Wilkins, who opened up the session and we're co-chairs of the Leadership Forum community. We very much thank you for your participation, your engagement, because we all learn from each other. We have a great set. Tomorrow we have the session that Tricia just mentioned. Next week, we have another session. It's how we can incubate leadership through our educational institutions. And Joel Wright and Chris Rem, who have devoted their lives to these issues, will be leading the sessions. And we encourage you to participate. If, for instance, you might say, well, I don't work in an educational institution, is this for me? What I would encourage you on behalf of our entire board is to join anyway, because one of the great benefits of the Leadership Forum community is to cross-pollinate across the different sectors, from educational, societal, to business, to your own personal journeys, and we all learn from them. And I know personally, I've always been inspired by both Joel and Chris and their message, so I encourage you to participate. We will keep the lines open, as they say, for a little while longer, so we would ask you to stay on if you want to chit-chat over the wires for the next few minutes, and for those who need to move on to a next commitment, again, we thank you for your participation. We hope that you participate next week as well. Take care. Have a great day.